Hello and welcome to the second match from the Dominion League. This match was against Swordfishtrombone, and this is the feature game because it showcases a new card from the second edition of Cornucopian Guilds, Footpad. Footpad gives you a couple coffers and also forces each other player down to 3 cards in hand. Footpad is a discard attack. However, the much more interesting part of Footpad is below the line. In games that have Footpad in the supply or in the kingdom, every time you gain a card during your action phase, you have to draw 1 card. Can we gain cards during our action phase in this kingdom? Yes. The obvious card that does that is Blockade. Blockade will gain a card during your action phase. When you do so, you draw a card. Because of Footpad's effect. Footpad does not need to be in your deck or in play or anywhere for its effect to take place on your hand size. That is a unique idea in Dominion. What else will trigger Footpad here? Cabin Boy can do it at the start of your turn, at the start of your action phase. Trash the Cabin Boy to gain a Cabin Boy, a contract, or a blockade. You will draw 1 card. Finally, Hideout can do it under certain circumstances. Hideout can trash an estate. When you do that, you gain a curse. That happens in the action phase. Therefore, you draw 1 card from Footpad. Footpad represents draw in this kingdom. And there are other cards that draw in this kingdom. Quite a few. Lab, obviously. Sheepdog can draw. And it is possible to get the reaction effect of Sheepdog, probably via Blockade or Cabin Boy. Finally, Apothecary will draw. It'll only draw coppers and potion, but that still can be useful, especially in the early part of the game. There is trashing in Hideout, only in Hideout. It is a little bit slow because the estates go to curses and then you have to also get rid of the curses, but it will get the job done if you are so inclined. And Hideout also represents the only source of plus action in the kingdom. So you do have to think a bit about how many terminals you want to play here, because every time you play the Hideout you have to trash a card, and that becomes an increasingly difficult decision, especially in the mid to late game. Do you want to put coppers in the deck so that the Hideout can trash it? Are you okay with trashing silver later in order to make use of the extra actions? Is it worth it? All of these questions you have to answer with Hideout. There's gain. There's gain in Blockade. Cabin Boy will also gain a little bit, and Architect's Guild is another powerful gainer. Those favors will come from either contract or bauble. And I think it's worth it to consider at least one of those 2 cards. Architect's Guild is probably the strongest gainer in the kingdom. Functions like a haggler. Plus buy is also there in Bauble and also on Seaway. What I am envisioning for this deck is to get maybe double province and start to green from there. But we'll have to see how things go according to the demands of the kingdom and what our opponent is doing and the shuffles. Now, how do we start here? I have the regulation for 3. Few ideas would come through your mind at this point. I like Apothecary, so naturally I'd think about potion first. Hideout is something that might come to your mind as well to get the trashing underway. Also, combined with Footpad, you connect with an estate. You will draw a card from that and maybe get to 5. Are you interested in getting to 5? Maybe. Footpad is a decent card to get on 5. I instead choose the Blockade route. I believe Blockade is quite strong. Not only does it gain, but it also makes it a bit uncomfortable for your opponent to gain one of the cards from a pile. Either Sheepdog or Hideout early, probably. Also, the Blockade will draw me a card when I play it because of Footpad's effect. So we start with the Blockade. It'll help me to gain more Sheepdogs as well, is part of the reason why I went for the gainer this early in the game. I think Sheepdog will be quite strong in this kingdom. We both open the same way. Blockade and Sheepdog. Now, luckily, I'm able to collide the two here, and ordinarily colliding terminals isn't good, but I can trigger a Sheepdog because of my Blockade. Here we go. Blockade. What I typically do with Blockade, especially in these kinds of kingdoms, is Blockade or Blockade. There are many piles I would wish to target here. Sheepdog, obviously a hideout at some point, a cabin boy maybe, harbinger. And that stays out of play and then comes into your hand next turn. So it is a bit like you start the next turn with 6 cards. That is exactly what it is actually, but if it's a harbinger, for example, you get to draw an extra card maybe. Alright, so you see 2 prompts up here there, the Footpad and the Sheepdog. In this case, it doesn't matter the order in which you trigger those. I end up drawing 3 cards either way off the single Blockade. So that is quite a good turn 3 for me. And at this point, I now get the potion. Because I've drawn 3 cards, I will reshuffle immediately on turn 4. And I would like to get the Apothecary as soon as possible. It is much better earlier. Apothecary represents draw, recall. Now my opponent gets a hideout on their turn 3. They don't see their Blockade critically. I have one in hand because, well, I blockaded that last turn. Now what do I blockade? I don't want to get yet another Blockade, but instead I get the hideout now. And I draw a card. Thanks, Footpad. Up to 4 now. I get another Sheepdog here. Here's my opponent's Blockade. Now they blockade a second Blockade. That'll trigger their Sheepdog, triggering the shuffle, of course. They buy a second Sheepdog. Look at what happens here. Thanks to Footpad and Sheepdog combined. Footpad draws 1. Sheepdog draws 2. Finds the other Sheepdog. Draws 2 more. And we are flying here. The only thing I didn't find was the other Blockade at this point. This could be a Footpad. I thought about it. But the other 4 cards in my deck, they are not good. The only good card is the Blockade. So I pursued to clear the top of the deck, and I picked up my first Apothecary. My opponent plays their hideout, draws a card after trashing their state, of course, and they blockade yet another hideout. Now this is a signal to me, the second hideout, that they are not interested in the Apothecary route at all. They probably won't get Potion or Apothecary because they want to trash more quickly than me. I will not get a second hideout. I'm okay with the coppers in the deck. I plan to play with the coppers because I plan to use Apothecary to draw them. Does affect your reliability a little bit, but I'm hoping the Blockades and the Sheepdogs will allow me to have good turns moving forward. We'll see what kind of deck Swordfishtrombone wants to build here. They have 5 and they get a Seaway. And they put the buy token on the Sheepdog, and that is something I maybe should have considered. I didn't consider on my last 5. The last time I had 5 was Pursue plus Apothecary, which is a reasonable buy, I think, to clear the top of the deck and get the Apothecary. But it's bad that I didn't think about it. Hideout triggers Footpad and Sheepdog. We draw 3 cards again. Apothecary finds 3 more. I get to my Blockade, and here you'll see what happened. The Apothecary drew 3 copper, but what it also did was it top decked a Sheepdog, and I know that because the Apothecary reveals the deck. Therefore, when I gain a card with my Blockade, I will draw into that Sheepdog guaranteed and get 2 more cards. This time I blockaded a Cabin Boy, not a Sheepdog. Maybe the Sheepdog is still better. The reason for the Cabin Boy is twofold. With Apothecary draw, if you have enough experience, you know you want cantrips or things that can draw after the Apothecary in order to pull the non-copper cards into your hand. And usually those are good cards like Blockades or Hideouts. Apothecary can't pick those up, but a lab followed following the Apothecary can pick those up. That's one reason. The second reason is that I plan to gain contracts with these cabin boys. At the start of my turn, I'll trash it, gain the contract, and if I have sheepdogs in hand, it'll trigger. And that is a form of reliability, hopefully. We'll see how that works out. I'm not entirely certain about it at this point. My opponent is able to trigger 3 of their sheepdogs after trashing an estate, gain the curse, draw a card with Footpad, 6 more with these 3 sheepdogs, and here's a huge turn for them. They blockade a sheepdog and buy 2 more. They have 6 sheepdogs already, and the last one is blockaded. I'm not really interested in picking up a curse at this point. I already have lots in my deck from my own hideout, so I will let that go. I will let that sheepdog go. Does mean that I will surrender the split 7-3 here. Draw up until the end of the deck because of the sheepdogs, which I know are on top of the deck thanks to my Apothecary. Well, they were in hand this time, I think. Last time it was because of the Apothecary. Anyways, we get up to the end of the deck. 7 and a potion is what? Well, it is another Apothecary. And now it is time for the Footpad. I was able to draw the whole deck here. And I feel like I can now make use of the stop card in the Footpad. It'll gain me some more money. It'll force my opponent to discard. I think now is the right time. I don't need draw. No. I need some more power represented by the Footpad. And the second Apothecary represents some consistency. Probably a little bit of draw as well. Blockade from my opponent gets them the 7 sheepdog. So that, I don't like that. And at this point, I really wasn't sure who was ahead because of that. That's quite a bit of draw. They have 7 sheepdogs. I probably don't have as much draw as that. We'll see how it works out though. They get a Footpad themselves. Alright. The cabin boy gets trashed into a contract, as we said before. We drew a card because of the Footpad, and then we reacted 1 of our sheepdogs to draw even more cards. Still, a little bit of a scary hand here. Apothecary is the only card that we see off the Footpad. Draws me some coppers, but look at what is on top of the deck. 2 sheepdogs. Thank you, Apothecary, because now we gain a card via the blockade. Draw into the sheepdog, which then triggers. Ta-da! Draw almost until the end of the deck here and force our opponent down to 3 cards in hand. 9 and a potion is available here. I go for a lab and yet another Apothecary. I spoke about not putting draw in the deck last turn, but here I missed out on the contract, so I just wanted to secure my position with the draw before looking to expand further. My opponent has a terrible turn. They just take the sheepdog from the blockade and pass. So it seems like there is some downside to having a deck full of sheepdogs. I have to assume that is what happened there. I'm not really sure why they were unable to play on. Anyways, we get the second contract now. I see a nice sheepdog on top of the deck here. I don't have to trigger it straight away. I can wait until I find one of its friends. I do. The blockade now will trigger it, and I keep gaining these cabin boys. They can represent money either through themselves or through another contract. The contract is gain, and gain means I can do something. For example, here, like gain province, by province gain gold of the Architects Guild. That is something that I initially considered, but undid. And instead I decided to keep building the deck. So I buy a gold, use the Architects Guild to gain a lab, and then I can buy another Apothecary. Hopefully my cabin boys can get me more contracts, and I should shortly be up to the double province that we wanted to at the start of the game. Here come the sheepdogs from my opponent, 3 of them. Here's our 4th. they get to a lab, though. It seems like they're not doing much, despite winning the Sheepdog split here. And we are well on our way. We've drawn our deck, or almost all of our deck, quite a few times now. And this prompts my opponent to resign. I guess they had a few bad hands and they felt sufficiently behind. I hope you enjoyed the showcase of Footpad. It is definitely an interesting card. Thanks for watching.